Glycemic Index Table of Common Foods. Use the index ratings listed here for common foods as a guide to help you make the best dietary choices every day. To begin with, let's look at some of the most common foods that are considered high on the glycemic index. Usually, these are foods that you will want to limit and only eat occasionally. You will notice that there are a couple of foods that look out of place. Baked potatoes, rice cakes and watermelon are all on the dreaded list. That's the high list, and yet they all seem like very healthy choices. What are they doing on this list, you might ask? As stated before in previous chapters, in order to keep the testing consistent and scientific, all foods had to be tested in equal amounts of carbohydrates. This means that watermelon, which has a very low amount of carbohydrates, had to be consumed in massive quantities in order to keep the test results equal. But watermelon also has a lot of natural sugar and sweetness, which when eaten in such a large quantity raise the blood sugar levels significantly. This is where the glycemic load value becomes an invaluable tool. When we calculate the glycemic index of watermelon, which is 0.72, and multiply it by 5 grams of carbohydrates in a typical slice of watermelon, we get a glycemic load value of 3.6. So even though it is listed as a high glycemic index food, we find that when it is consumed in a particular serving size, it does not raise our blood sugar levels to the extent as on the list. The same is true of rice cakes and potatoes, but to a lesser extent. They do raise blood sugar levels more than whole grain pastas and brown rice, but they are also loaded with so many nutrients and vitamins that it isn't wise to avoid them altogether. Use good judgment and common sense when you make your food choices. Remember that this doesn't have to be hard or take a lot of thought once you get the idea. All it takes is being aware of how your body functions and what we can fuel it with that will help it to operate rather than work against it. Also, in case you are wondering, Gatorade is on the list as a high glycemic index food because as an energy drink it is made up mostly of carbohydrates and sugars, which replenish a body after it has exerted an enormous amount of energy. But as a high glycemic index food, you would want to limit how often you drink it, unless you have suddenly become a professional athlete or a long-distance runner. In the next video, we'll go through the medium, and then we will do the low glycemic index foods.